Hello, gentlemen. Sorry I can't be here with you today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Aristotle that you annotated for today. I'm going to repeat a little bit of what I was talking about last class, but I will try not to repeat too much. All right, so starting from the first paragraph there, when we're talking about the community, right? So as we said last time, right, every community aims for some good. That doesn't mean that it's an actual good. It means that the community thinks that it's good, right? So this is a reference back to the beginning of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, that every action we do aims at some good, something we think is good. We might not do actual good because we might not do what we aim to do. We might fail, and we might think that something is good but be wrong. Because Aristotle thinks there is an objective good, right? That we can figure out what is good if we examine the facts well enough, right? And so every community aims at some good. A complete community aims at the most complete good. So, as I said last time, a complete community is one that includes the communities below it, right? So the state of California is more complete than the city of San Mateo, because the state of California includes the city of San Mateo. And so the city of San Mateo aims for goods for the citizens of San Mateo. The state of California aims for goods for the citizens of California. So the good of California includes the good of San Mateo, right? So that's why California would be a more complete state. But when Aristotle talks about states, he doesn't mean states in the United States, right? He means the most complete political community. So the political community of which there is no higher. Like the United States would be the state, right? Or Mexico, or Canada, or Russia, or Ukraine, right? Those would be states because there's no higher political community of which they are a part. So then in the second and third paragraphs, he talks about how we get to the state. And he's not giving a historical story. He didn't go back and research where people were and how people came together. He is giving a kind of theoretical history. And so he says that we start by coming together as families, right? And why do we come together as families? For survival. A small group of people can come together, survive, male and female, ensure that the human race can continue, right? So survival there. And if you've got a small family, you can get by. But you're not going to do much more than get by, right? If you get families together in a village, then you get what Aristotle says in the third paragraph. This is the first sentence of the third paragraph. The village is a community that results from several families coming together, not only for daily needs. So we can say the village comes together for more than daily needs. Again, repeating myself, if one person is the butcher, the other the baker, the other the candlestick maker, then everyone gets more from less work. Right now we have someone who tends the animals and we have some people who farm, and so we get more efficient use of our time. Right? The farmers spend all their time farming and provide for the rest of the community. The people who tend the animals spend all their time at that, and they provide for the rest of the community. The blacksmith focuses on that, gets better at blacksmithing, and provides metal for the community. Right, so specialization is possible when we get to a village. So everyone gets more with less work, more free time. But Aristotle doesn't think this is enough, right? When we get villages together, he says, this is at the end of the third paragraph, the state comes into being to meet the needs of life, but it continues to exist for the sake of the good life. So the state, the largest political community, comes together or stays together for the good life, right? And it is self-sufficient. The one that's large enough to be self-sufficient, that it can meet all its needs, and that might include by trading, right? But it can meet all the needs of its people. Now, why does it come together for the good life? Aristotle thinks, and I know I'm repeating myself, try and get past this quickly, that we can't have a good human life until we have the division of labor in the state, right? Where there's enough people working and supplying for the needs that some people don't need to work at all, and everyone has more leisure time. So in that leisure time that everyone has some of, and some people have lots of, we can do art, science, and philosophy. And Aristotle thinks these three things are necessary for a good human life. We're not fully human unless we're using our reason. We're thinking critically and questioning, why do we even come together and survive? Why do we do this? How do we do this? Science. What do we live for? Beauty, art, right? So when we get these three things, science, art, and philosophy, then we finally have a fully human life, a good human life. Before that, we have more like animal lives, or somewhere between a fully human life and an animal life, where we're just focusing on our daily needs. Animals don't think about why they do things, in general, at least Aristotle thought so. They focus on getting their food and drink right now, procreating, right, just immediate needs, and not thinking about them. And when you're in this situation, one family out in the wilderness, you're in a similar situation where you've got to think about immediate needs, and you can't ask big questions, right? So that's the first three paragraphs, and the other ones follow from those three, right? And the fourth, he says, because we start from natural things, right, which is just the human person. We've got a human person here, coming together into family, coming together into villages, coming together into states, because each of those parts is natural, and because it's a natural progression starting from the human person, right, then the end result is also natural. The state is natural, right? And this is all kind of part of a human progression, right? The comment, we find a thing's nature when it's finished growing, so we look at the nature of a horse or a human being by looking at a fully grown horse or human being, not an infant, to see what human beings are capable of. Infants might not be capable of forming states, but human beings, adult human beings are, right? And that's what he's interested in. Paragraph 5, right, then the state is natural, and the human being is by nature a political animal, because human beings are animals, right, who come together in states. So then someone who's a citizen of no state by nature and not by chance, so not they just haven't been kicked out, right, but does not need a state. Either they don't need a state because their desires are too little, right, they only are looking for survival like an animal, or they are able to attain the good life without any support, without food and drink and all that kind of stuff. So they're gods, right? You're either higher than a state, you don't need other people to do science, art, and philosophy like a god, or you're lower and you're only aiming at survival like an animal, right? Right, so then paragraph 6, we get that awareness of goodness and badness is one of the things that separates human beings from animals and is a necessary part of a state, that only moral beings can make a family and a state, right? Paragraph 7 and 8, this is getting into the idea, basically, that a human being is less important than the state that they inhabit, right? Because a human being is just a part. Just like a hand on its own can't do much. If I cut my hand off and it's just lying on the ground, it's not going to do what it should do. It can't grab things, right? And that's what a hand is supposed to do. Aristotle defines what a thing is by what it can do, what it does, right? So a human being can't do what they're supposed to do. They can't live a good life if they're on their own. They can only live a good life as a part of a state. And that's why any human being who's kicked out of a state ceases to have an ability to live a good life. But a state that loses one human being doesn't lose anything, right? Because there are lots of other people who can take that one person's spot. So the state then is prior to or more important than or more necessary than the human person, the one human person, right? Any particular human person. And then paragraph 9, we get into this idea that human beings because we're also capable of really good things. We're also capable of really bad things. Think of the Bond villain who's, really smart and really well outfitted and really rich and all these things. The perfect villain because they have all of these tools that make human beings really good, right? Able to live the best life. And yet they use them for bad purposes. What is a bad purpose? Well, we have to turn to the next section, the what is justice section, to figure that out, right? And I told you just a little bit about this, but really the focus is on this first line. Justice is equality for equals and inequality for unequals, right? So if we are equal, then justice demands that we be treated equally. If we are unequal, justice demands that we are treated unequally, right? So we can look at this both in the case of crime, but also in the case of distributing goods in a community, right? So justice for Aristotle is not just about punishing crime. But if we're going to punish crime, right, then two people who do the same crime in the same circumstances should get the same punishment. It shouldn't matter what color their skin is, for example, right? We see countless times in our own justice system that it matters what color your skin is. The white person will get a much lower sentence than the black person. That's not justice, right? Not according to Aristotle, because they're equal. They did the same crime. The only thing they're unequal in is skin color, and that is not relevant to their crime, right? So we're equal in many ways, we're unequal in many ways. We need to figure out the ways in which we're equal and treat ourselves equally, treat each other equally in that way, and figure out the ways that we're unequal and treat each other unequally in that way, right? Figure out what's relevant equalities and inequalities. We're going to look next class, the Declaration of Human Rights from the UN, right? And it says, just as a human person, as a human being, you're entitled to certain rights. So all human beings are equal in dignity and in these basic human rights. Just by being human, you have these rights. You don't have to earn them, right? But we see that people are unequal in many ways, right? So if we are looking at a distribution, a case of distribution, right? You guys, I think I showed this last time, but if we've got a fence that people are trying to see over, we have someone that's really small that can't see over even with the box that they're standing on. We've got someone that the box is just right for, and then we've got someone who didn't need the box at all. This would be a bad distribution. This would be an unjust distribution of goods, right? When what we can have is we have the person who doesn't need a box, it just stands, right? The person who needs a box should also be on a box, and then the person who needs two boxes, right, should get the two boxes. So same amount of goods we have in each situation. We have three things to divide, in this case, three boxes to stand on, right? The just distribution would be one that takes into account the differences and the needs in each case. Doesn't need a box, isn't helped with a box, right? And so the just distribution there would take into account that inequality and give the person that needs it two boxes, and the person who doesn't need a box would get no boxes, right? Just like if I'm distributing money and I've got $20 and I've got Jeff Bezos standing there and a homeless person that's starving standing there. Should I give equally $10 to each of them? No, Bezos doesn't need my $10, but the homeless person who is starving can make a lot better use of that $20, right, than I can or than Bezos can. So we need to take into account differences when we're thinking of what's just, right? So back to paragraph 10 there, we judge badly because we often just judge in our own cases and we're poor judges of our own cases, right? But the thing that we need to keep in mind is what is just is always what is just for certain persons. We need to take into account circumstances that people have in order to tell what is just and what is not just, right? We can't just say what is just in general. It needs to be just for these circumstances, right? So paragraph 11, we think that we're judging about what's just in general, but we should only judge about what's just in particular circumstances. And then paragraph 12, one of the common ways to misread paragraph 12 is you think Aristotle was saying that wealthy people should contribute more and should get more out of the state. In fact, he's using that example to show that wealthy people should not get more out of the state. Because, he says, if people came together into community for the sake of wealth, then they'd participate as much as their wealth entitles them. Skip down to the last line. But the state is not only for the sake of wealth or for the sake of life, but rather for the sake of the good life. So the point of a community is not to gain wealth and get wealthier. That's not the goal of the community. It might be something the community should do, right? But not for its own sake, for the sake of something else. Wealth is always used for something. Wealth isn't good in itself. Wealth is good for something else. For what? For Aristotle, it's for the good life, right? And so the people who can contribute more to the good life in a society. And for Aristotle, that's going to be the scientists, the artists, and the philosophers. They should be the ones that get out most from a society as well, right? The ones who make it possible for everyone else to live a good life are the ones that should get more out of it. And the more you get out of a society should be the more that you put into it, that you contribute to everyone living a good life, right? Or as many people as possible living a good life. Okay, I will see you next class. I hope that clarified things. I'll answer questions next class if you've got them. What we're going to be doing today is looking at John Locke, right? So annotate the Locke. Locke is giving us it's not history, again. Not history, just like Aristotle's not history. It's a thought experiment, thinking about what must have happened to create private property, right? This kind of thing had to happen. Doesn't mean that one person actually did this, right? But he's thinking about the origins of private property. And when he's speaking about God giving us the world in general, he's not thinking very religiously. He's just thinking, we could even replace that with nature if you really wanted to, that nature gives us the world, but to all human beings. So how do I, as a single human being, make use of what was given to us in common, right? That's the problem. We will talk about that next time after you annotate it. Have a great day, guys.